Okay. Hello, everybody. We're getting started a few minutes late, so sorry about that. But we're here with the Atlanta FileMaker Developers Group. It's a small group today because we're right after the holiday, but let's take a look around the room. Is everyone here? So let's start and do introductions.
Hi, I'm Christy with Mac Advantage.
I'm Todd Daniel in Transition.
Erica Kidd, Blue Feather.
And I'm David Nandel from Blue Feather. So today we're all sharing our favorite custom functions, and everyone's brought some things in. Actually, did you bring something also, or do you have something?
No.
Okay, that's fine. So anyway, we've got a lot of custom functions to share today. Some of our favorite things. I think this is going to be probably a shorter meeting. But afterwards, we'll also go over some help debugging some things. I think you had some custom functions for us to debug through. And so let's jump in and get started right away. So Christy is going to be the first person to present here. Let's close these down. All right, and so which one? Let's see here. You're going to, let me switch this to show our screen. Space, all right. Okay, so there we go, and let's see. You're going to start here. All right, why don't you can take it from here.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so the custom functions that I looked up mainly came from Brian Dunning's site, a lot that I liked there. This one right here. All right, so my first one is just going to be a basic mailing list. And it can be used for first name, last name concatenation, for envelopes, or anything. And basically, as you enter in your names, oops. Street. All right, so you can see as you enter your information into the fields, the function itself substitutes the information in and does the carriage returns and recognizes if it is or is not an empty field.
So you
probably the most simple.
Blank spaces in there?
What's that?
So you don't end up with like any blank spaces?
No blank spaces, no carriage returns that don't belong. And then you could just use it for a salutation if you had a salutation, first name, middle initial, last name, and even a suffix like a junior or something like that. All right, so that's your basic mailing label, probably one of the most simple ones that everyone can use. The age is the second one that is great. And let's get to that layout. Right here. All right, so age is a little bit more complicated. So if you put in someone's birth date.
That is old.
Oops, goodness, thank you.
Okay.
Then this function will actually calculate out the years, months, and days, and then put it in a nice visible format right there. I believe this takes into account leap years and all the calculations that go with that. And if you are interested in looking up any of these, you can make this file available. And at the top, I've put the web link that went to Brian Dunning's site that has that. And in this field here, I have all the basic information that was present on the page, who wrote it, who created it, what day, and then their details about it. Okay, so that's the basics of the age custom function.
Nice.
This one is one of my favorite that I use a lot in when I was maintaining a system for a large corporation and we needed to have our holidays listed. And so whatever year you'll put in, it'll automatically tell you all the major holidays for that year and when they're observed. Yeah, so that was a handy one. There are some that are missing, like Groundhog Day and some other stuff, but you could go in and manipulate, and that's quite a hefty function to get all of the details in. And this one actually requires a second function called date by date occur. And that is to take up for the ones that are on like the third Tuesday or the last Monday or whatever, however those holidays work that aren't on set dates. So it's just a fascinating thing to say, okay, last year, when was that holiday that we had and how is it different this year? And so that's just handy to get things set at the beginning of the year to make sure you've got them all on a calendar.
It looks pretty easy to customize it too, to add additional holidays on there.
Or maybe even people's birthdays, or I guess you could even somehow link it up with some of your contacts if there were important ones that you wanted to know.
You could even put leap year in there to show the recent years.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of holidays that I would have put in that are missing, but it's a nice start, and it is pretty detailed to get all of that information, just the ones that are in there.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I changed something. I might have changed something on one of them just to experiment around a little bit. And then the last one on this one that I really like is, there's a lot of incarnations of this one, but it's called Magic Dates. And the great thing about Magic Dates, let me see if I can find where that one is. And sorry that I'm not giving credit to the people that created these, but as you can see down here, it'll tell you who created and the function of it and what the input and output would look like. But what's great about this one is it looks at today's date, and then you can choose any kind of a range that you want. So if you choose yesterday, it knows the date. If it wants this week, it knows what this week was. If you want the quarter, last quarter, based on today's date, we'll give you that quarter. And this is great to be plugging into different scripts and things where you want to just, don't want to think about it. You just want to get the date range so that you could copy and paste it and use it for searches.
The calendar then.
Absolutely.
I like it.
Now, the ones that I wasn't sure, and if we have time towards the end of the meeting that we can figure out, is this one I thought was great. It was called line numbering. And essentially what it does is once you give it just plain text, like A's and B's and C's. Oh, actually, no, I got this one to work. I'm sorry. Okay, so this one I got. So whatever text you put in, the result will automatically list it for you. Numbers in for you. So it's kind of nice with the carriage returns. That's handy for some things. And then the one that I didn't get was the extracting email addresses. So if you put in some text, part of it is that once you have, let's say, copied and scraped maybe a web page or something, that all of the email addresses one second, let me see if I can find it here. All of the email addresses will be extracted in a nice list for you. Here it is. So for example, if you just had a web page that you scraped, any email address that was in there would come out in a list format from wherever it came from. So if it was a giant email that had just written text, it would strip the email addresses out to use them. And for some reason, I couldn't get the placeholder thing to work. All right, so that was a lot of the stuff that I found from Brian Dunning's site. Another one that I liked, which I think came from, oh gosh, I can't remember his name, was a nice little handy calendar. And this one also has tooltips. I changed the color on here so that the holidays would be in bright yellow, but as you hover over, it gives you a nice quarter of calendar thumbnails, I guess you would say. And as you hover over the top, and any date that you change on there, so if we were looking at November, then you can see the holidays that appear. And again, hovering over them will tell you what the holidays are. There's Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Halloween.
It's a lot of holidays in December.
Yeah, well, the December, they have Kwanzaa.
Oh, wow.
Hanukkah, all the Hanukkahs are
I
listed,
see.
and all the Kwanzaas are listed. I
Okay.
think if I hover there long enough, I think that's all the Kwanzaa. And then you have your Christmas here, and then your New Year's, and New Year's Day. So yeah, so I thought that was really handy just for a quick little calendar to pop that one in there.
So what's the custom function here?
Oop.
It's back in the bottom. It's in the
I'm
back.
sorry.
Very good.
All right, so. I think he's got 3 of them in here because he has different, he's got a dual layer versus a single.
So what is this doing? Is this rendering an HTML calendar for a web viewer?
No, it's not HTML, it's actual fields.
I saw somebody do this in variables so that you didn't have to have any records associated.
Yeah,
my
he
God.
actually has fields, I think they're repeating fields,
Yeah.
actually. I'm not exactly sure how he did it.
Something to do during the game. you know,
Yeah.
Make a bunch of fields.
Well, I'm sure once you've got, I think it was just a, yeah.
I thought it was in CSS.
You guys might know a little better than me of how he did it, but he's got the dual layer with the conditional formatting, without formatting. And then just based on that initial date, and then I'm sure like the one that gave all the holidays for the year, he's probably got some form of that in here to display the tooltips of the holidays, but this one is pretty extensive.
Goodness.
Yeah. And so here's where he's got all the holiday
Hanukkah,
information
Kwanzaa,
in here. Yeah.
Go up a little bit. I think I saw the calendar thing go by. Computer
All
edition.
right, so here it's starting on a Monday versus a Sunday.
Localized on the label field to avoid processing declarations about. Yeah, he's commented all of this so you can. There, calendar. Okay.
And it did require quite a few fields as well that he's got in there.
Main variables.
And then here's where the colors can be changed. So I just commented out what used to be a light green just to put a bright yellow in to see what that would look like.
Good.
So what is it that this function is doing?
It's generating
Rendering the whole
the
calendar,
data
yeah,
for that calendar.
everything on the calendar.
based on a date, based on a
Just
date field,
based on date G, that's it.
option. Well, look at the
Well, no, I mean, like,
parameters at
there's
the
a lot of
top.
stuff on the layout that I'm seeing, and you're passing in a set of parameters. So what are you passing in, and
Yeah.
what is the output?
The
of
only
this?
parameter that I pass in is the global date.
Mhm.
Everything else assigns itself up at the top here.
Well, I see that there's a number of parameters up at the top.
Right. Date field, option, iteration. Well,
Here, let's,
So I'm curious what the actual custom function itself is doing.
It's calculating each of the days based on your whatever date you've put in there. Then it's
Then
picking-
it's redrawing everything and
Yeah.
So
assigning.
the custom function
The
is doing
tooltips.
those things. It could be outputting some values, and then those fields might be
Right.
parsing whatever values, but that's what I'm wondering, what is the custom function actually doing? Because it's not setting any of those things, because it doesn't know about the layout at all. You can make a totally blank layout. The custom function would still work exactly the same way. So my question is, what is the custom function itself doing? Like, what do you put into it? What is the output that you get from it?
Okay, go back to the custom function.
So like if we put this in the data viewer, what do we get out of this? We call this function in the data viewer. Cancel here, let's open up the data viewer and see what we're actually getting.
I'm not sure where the data
Any
is.
tools? Data viewer. So go to watch, and add a new function in here.
Plus button.
Okay, so call that function here. So was it FM?
I
Type
don't
in
even
the
know
expression
what it
field.
was called.
It's not going to show up there. Type in the expression field, do FM.
And calendar.
There it is. So your date field is that date G value, right?
Right. The global that
Okay, so assign.
populates everything.
So
Option iteration, whether or not it starts on a Sunday or Monday, whether or not to highlight the weekends, and
the holidays.
showing the holidays.
But he's saying if you assign those fields, if you highlight that date underscore field and assign something from the left column,
So put
It will
date G in
evaluate.
there.
Like change it, you mean?
Mhm. So I don't know if you want to fill in any of these other values here, maybe leave them blank, or I don't know if you need true or false in them or what.
I don't have any idea. I'm not going to take over here. I have no idea what you're.
So let's take a look here. If we go, so we're not going to pass in any options. I don't know what the values are supposed to be for this.
there you go.
So this results in the number 29.
What's the date? What was the date?
Let's take a
I
look.
put something in
Date field.
November.
November 1, 2017.
So this custom function, it looks like it's returning a number, which is then used by all these other calculations to mean some things. Like if we maybe put in a true here, I wonder if that changes it. So there's other things like highlight weekends, highlight whatever.
Yeah.
So just moved it from 29 to 30.
Which there are 30 days.
Well, if you're starting it on a Monday versus a Sunday, I think that was the one that he put a 1 on, so.
So I don't know what those other values are in there. But anyway, I was wondering what the actual function was doing, which in this case, it looks like it's putting out some sort of a number that's used probably for has other meanings in other places. So I think that value 30 is used here with some of these other things.
So up there it was a.
Yeah. Let's see what this does. And that just also returns 30. So this function is used as just part of it looks like it's a tool for the rest of this calendar solution.
Mhm.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
So there's 30 days in November. You've told it November 1st. It's got 29 remaining days in the month. I don't know exactly.
So we'd have to look through all the other calculations.
Yeah.
It looked like it had 42 repeats, so it's got 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so it's got 6 rows of data
Mhm.
that it's plugging in. And that's all I got for my custom functions.
That was great.
I think Erica will take over that one right there. You have some similar ones to this as well.
One of them dovetails with one of your samples.
And I haven't even looked at that yet, so
Oh, okay.
I think it works, but I'm not sure where it's set to open or anything.
There you go. Okay. This is a custom function that allows you to pull out a parameter from a list of multiple, a multi-value. Help me with the verbiage. Multivariable
Script parameter.
Thank you.
Or yeah, multi-line script parameter.
Right. So you're passing in this information. So what if you want the third item off the list? And so instead of having to write that out every time, the script parameter is doing that for you. So I pulled the third one off, or the first one.
That's pretty cool. I know I use script parameters quite frequently, and having, and oftentimes pass in more than one value
Right.
as a script parameter. And I do always end up doing this get value, get script parameter over and over and over again. So that's a good idea to use that as a custom function. I like that a lot.
You can see that would be very helpful. This dovetails with something Christy was talking about. This is another name parsing thing. You can put in all these, each part of a name, and end up with, an English correctly and all of those kinds of things.
And what's interesting on this one is that there's another function that makes it simpler, that doesn't have all the is empty and just has the case with the.
Funny you should mention it.
There we go. The list function, which was similar. Yep. Perfect.
Yep. He, giving credit to Scott Howard, who produced this, he said, that was the way he had learned to do it, or in an earlier version or whatever, but the more he worked with these kinds of things, he was able to refine it. And so there's an example of refining.
Yep.
And here, this is similar to what you were talking about. This is the date range, yesterday, this week, last week. And I just created buttons for a client on a report like this, just to help them out. I see this kind of thing in Quicken all the time.
QuickBooks, it's
Yeah.
real nice.
Because I always have to say the rhyme, right? 30 days has September, when
I have to
you
use
want
my fingers.
In this quarter, this fiscal year, it's got all that as well.
Yeah. I thought that was
Last
pretty
year,
handy
So
for,
it's great for accounting.
yeah.
That is very cool.
This is add remove list item. I thought this was kind of interesting, but basically, if I can put a value in that's not on the list, and when I trigger the function, it will add it. And it did, and you'll have to believe me, it's down there. Okay, or I can take in time, oops, in time off.
That's useful.
And that made me think of that function that you created that had a list of stuff through a web viewer. I can't remember what your thing was, but I'm glad this is on there, because the tags. This reminded me of your tags thing. I don't know if you used something similar.
I don't know if it was exactly the same custom function, but it did use a custom function to do the same thing, to create a list, and that's how the tags are done. It's just a list view.
Right.
If it's already there, it puts it on. If it's not there, or if it's already there, it takes it off. If it's not there, it puts it on.
Yeah,
So
I thought that
it
was a
essentially
handy
does the
one.
same thing, and then renders the HTML from it.
Well, that was pretty neat.
But yeah, it is really useful. There's lots of uses for that.
This one I didn't really, it was interesting, but I didn't know how I would use it.
And the function knows it's an email. Or it knows if he's got some data in here. I should just use his data. But this knows that it's a date. Or it knows if it's an integer.
Mhm.
It,
Does it have a large integer?
yeah, I
There's one if you go to integer and you type it, fill the whole thing in.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly that I haven't thought about needing this, but now that I know it exists, maybe I will think about needing it.
I think
Okay.
he was saying if it
Fine.
was a giant search string that you were using, that that's helpful with something, but I really didn't know.
I've got a client and they have a contact record and they have to set up related like contact information records, and that's where they put in email addresses and phone numbers and all that kind of stuff and faxes, those things. And so something like this maybe would be useful for them, where the user goes in and just puts the number in it and then it figures out and can automatically label it as being an email address or a phone number. And handle regular addresses too, but you know, it might help them save the user a click, you know, just type in whatever and it knows if it's a phone number or email address. You don't have to fill in that field.
Next. This is turning a number into words for writing checks.
Mhm.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, I thought it was really cool. And not only it can deal with negative numbers, decimals, all that kind of stuff, but it can, oops, hold on. I want to deal with just integers here. This can do some super huge numbers.
Give it some cents and 3 cents.
Really? Point?
Yeah.
Okay.
345
Nomen
decillion. I have not even heard that before. All
Can we see the scripting for that? It's amazing.
right.
Yes, in fact, we probably can.
Word to words.
There it is. And this actually, as I recall in his explanation, calls 2 other supported custom functions. Now what they are at the moment, I don't remember. Number to word suffix is one of them. And there's another one. It requires the subfunctions, number to words, underscore, and number to words suffix up there. He's made a little header up there.
So all those words like decillion and septicillion, they're all stored.
Yes.
Also do that, go to number to words. It should be in there, right?
So the words are in.
Oh, they're in
As a
another.
separate function, yeah.
Let's see.
They're called.
Here's number to words. Hundreds power,
Okay.
tens power, ones power.
The tens and the teens.
Numbers to words suffix. Okay, getting closer.
It's all stored. This is one thing.
Oh, there's a list right there. Okay. Trigent.
It's really amazing.
You see that right now? Wow.
So it's just sent with billion added.
It's fun to look behind the curtain, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
That's pretty cool.
I thought that was pretty cool.
I want to check that has that number on it.
Yeah, exactly. Then what would your motivation be to do all of this?
Say, look, I could go for a check with that. That would be great.
Oh, the bank would turn it down. They'd be sure it was a fraud somehow. But it's
I
just
think
fun.
that's also the U.S. deficit.
Or the population or something, yeah. But that was neat. Trim 4, we actually use this one.
Very useful.
Yes. Notice up at the top in blue here, it shows the characters that you normally can't see down here in this text box. So there's a carriage return and a space, and then there's this is my text, test, period, 2 spaces and 2 carriage returns. And so we want to trim all that out because, you know, users cannot be relied on to leave those things out. And so we're going to help them and pull it out. And even though that doesn't look dramatically different, as we all know, it's different.
Oh yeah, it's getting out the trailing and leading spaces.
Yeah,
White space, all the white space.
yeah, it's all gone.
Well, that
So
would be nice
FileMaker's
too.
trim function is not particularly good,
It just takes the spaces. It doesn't take the
Yeah.
carriage returns.
and it doesn't do tabs. I don't think either. Some of the other stuff.
I think you're right.
But this is, I think, handles a lot more. So
Mhm.
Mhm.
That would be good to get the double spaces when people are doing data entry, to add that in there. I don't know if it had double spaces, but that's one that I would always have to clean up.
It's all
Trailing
I
spaces.
think if it's
There.
leading or trailing, it would do it. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the regular trim function would do that too.
Now, there was another function that looked really neat that
Could
stripped
use
out all the
this.
formatting, so that would take it just to text. So if there was anything that, if you from a website, it would get rid of the bold and the italic and the
Mhm.
sizing and all of that.
yes,
I don't know which
text
one that
remove.
was.
Text
Uh,
format remove.
Yeah,
Yeah.
text
Format
format remove.
Mhm.
That's the one.
That's a native FileMaker.
Yeah.
Is it?
I use that all the time
Mhm.
because otherwise, if you don't, whatever you're storing that information in is a jumbled mess if you don't,
Now, in your
Okay.
recipe solution,
Yes,
when you
exactly.
change everything to TSP from teaspoon or TBS
Yes.
or all of that, is that a custom function?
That's,
Do you create that? and then-
it could be a custom function, but right now it's just a calculation. It's just a substitute
That you
if-
just
if
run
it-
on your found record set?
to run on itself
Okay.
and replace the data in the record. It's but I could very easily
That's awesome.
make it a custom function. This
Get director.
Get director, exactly. What he was showing here was that he's got data in, let's see, here. In here, so here's Gattaca and the director and the writer. So he's got something to pull from in this. And so if you put in,
I see.
oh, what did I, thank you. IACA.
GTTACA.
ACA, I should just use his sample data and stop messing up his beautiful
Does
thing.
this use execute SQL?
It does. Knew you would like that. There it is. Little execute
So it's
SQL
pulling
function.
from this movie database.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So rather than if you're writing a script, otherwise you do a bunch of set variables and things like that to get your results and rewrite this kind of, you end up rewriting this execute SQL query probably multiple times throughout your system
Mm-hmm.
for each script that called it. And so I guess by putting it into a custom function, it saves you the need to do that.
Mhm.
That's a good use of that.
Can you keep scrolling down?
Sure. There's a little bit more.
And then it concatenates it all together in the format.
Yeah, this is a FileMaker Academy file. I'd be happy to put the link up to
Mhm.
find it. Yeah, and he had True Grit.
Is
Was
this
it
Steve McQueen?
Nice,
What's N1?
nice presentation. That's his
That's the
sample
newer one.
data.
I know, I want to see what other those.
Movie one was The Godfather.
That was the remake, the one that he had on there with Cohen. True Grit. It was the
It wasn't the Steve McQueen.
I
movie?
thought
it's
that
a new
was
one. It was 2010 remake.
Oh,
nicely presented.
Mhm.
Okay, next. Oh, stop.
Woo, woo, woo.
Oh, Eric actually had the other ones in the custom function file too. You want to do those?
Custom function file.
We have the date one in there and the
Bubble
phone
bus.
number one. And the desktop, it says like CF examples in the top right corner. I
Okay.
copied them into there.
Oh,
So you have to make some fields, but
I have to make some fields. Oops.
save.
Okay. Lots of coaching. All right. And then, and what am I doing in here? I don't want to be in here. Okay, so put the phone field in the layout. And why did it? I want to use the custom function in the setup of the field.
It's a good place to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we've got more
The
than.
second one.
Oh, thank you.
That's the first one. Yeah. Sorry, I meant the second phone.
Oh, I thought you
I
meant
think
the
we named
second.
them all the same.
Now, do the custom functions look different there? Was that like an icon that looks a little different?
Mhm, yeah.
Mhm. And then I'm gonna put the phone in as,
Field.
yeah, I should have called it phone format or something.
Make sure you.
Okay. And I'll bet that's not big enough to display. Did I just?
No, that's all fine. You just took the field off.
I just took the field off. That's not what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to do. There. Okay, so now you put in, yeah, no records, true. Okay, so when I key in the information, I just put in a dash. I didn't do the parentheses.
Does it
The
change?
bracket.
Does it change it? So if you click
Yep.
on it, does it keep it the old way?
Nope. It's reformatted it based on some, here, I'll show you the, oh. Terrible
Can you
habit
just
of
type
doing
in
that.
all 10 numbers and will it do it for you
Yeah.
too?
Yes.
So with or without dashes,
Yes.
just 10 numbers?
Mm-hmm. And tab out of it and reformat it.
Huh. Well, that's nice.
So because you put it in as an auto enter calculation on the field, time the field is modified.
Now, if you put in more characters than 10, will it tell you that it's an invalid number or anything like
I think it
that?
just leaves them.
It
Just add
trims
that
them
at the
off.
end?
So if you had an extension, you'd want to do that in a
Mhm.
separate extension.
right. Very nice.
Okay. You doing dates?
You can do the date.
I'm doing the date
I don't
one
know how
too.
that one works, so you're the one that would do the research.
Oh,
It's in the same file.
It's in the same file. Okay.
But yeah, that had that magic number string in there.
Yes, it did.
And I do not know how that works.
Okay.
So let's talk about the problem is first, so we understand what this is supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a combination of a couple different functions. And the duration minus weekends, I think that right?
Yes.
So we had a client that wants to know the time that a job was in their shop, piece of equipment was in their shop. And they didn't want the weekends to count. And so this uses another custom function, we've modified it a little bit, where it tells you how many work days there are in a particular time. So we kind of do the inverse of that to figure out how many weekends there are within the date range, and then subtract 24 hours per weekend day out of the date range. So Erica, you were looking this up about how this actually functions.
Yeah, this calculation's on FileMaker's website. They've shared this with everybody. But the thing that got my attention, not that the rest of it isn't interesting, was this what did this represent? And the answer to that is it represents each of the 49 possibilities for the start or end date combinations that are possible in this calculation. And
so what is it?
yeah, I see. Hold on. Let me pull up a
note. Close that one down.
Well, I just shared with you the note that I was writing about it. Can I?
Okay.
Am I in the wrong spot? There you go. That's the one.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So somebody broke it apart into each week. So instead of looking at the big long number that maybe doesn't make as much sense, when you start here, you're looking at it 1 week at a time, depending on where the start date and the end date fall. So it's a grid.
So what is it looking at there?
Okay, you see, you're looking at Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday across the top, and also Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday going down the right-hand side. And so the end date is represented by the column headings on the top, and the start date is represented by the rows on the side.
Is it the day of the week? The story said the start date and the end of the day. Is it the day of the week?
Yes, the date day. So,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, maybe that's it down there.
Yeah, so I spread that out a little bit further so you could sort of see, because somebody had written in and said, well, what if I have a 6-day work week? How do I change this number?
Mhm.
And so he explained a little further in this blog post about how to create this chart and how to essentially manufacture this number. So he started with, this is still for the 5-day week though.
Mhm.
But Sunday and Sunday gets a 0, and you advance the day only when the previous day was a work day. So Monday was a work day, but Sunday wasn't, so it still stays 0. Tuesday was a work day, and so was Monday, so you advance 1. And you create this chart. You go across the row that way, and then you start over.
So for Monday,
Mm-hmm.
if it's ending on Monday,
Yeah,
we're
that's
saying it started on Sunday, then it's been 0
work days.
work days.
Exactly.
If it started on Sunday and it ends on Tuesday,
It's been
it's been 1 work day.
Exactly. And so you just keep going, and then you go down to the next row, and you keep that same rule, and that's how you're generating this number. And then you concatenate all of this together, and that becomes the number that they give you up here. Up here, this one.
I see.
So is the second part middle the same as the top number?
Run that past me again.
There's a second, well, I guess there's a second middle part after the first one if you go down 3 lines from what you've got highlighted.
Oh,
So that's the middle,
yes.
so it looks like they're identical.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, they
the
are.
same number.
They are. But there's 49. So here's has a number for each of the 49 combination of start and end days. That's what that is.
I still don't get it.
So scroll down back to the grid, because the
Sure.
grid makes sense. So what the long number is all
Yes.
of this concatenated
Exactly.
all together.
But how is it used? Is it used as a position? Is it used as a number that calculates with something? Is it a?
Yes, and so
Yes.
that's what it does. That's what it does next. Is
Yes.
it grabs the right position.
Yeah, the first part of the calculation, the 5 times this right here, is the number of working days for a full work week. The second part is the number of working days in the partial week remaining. And the last part calculates the position in the string.
Yeah.
So once it knows the start date, it populates into the calendar.
Mhm.
And you're just
So the
wanting
start
to,
day of the week.
Start date of the week.
Yeah. And then it figures out how many, I guess, days down it is.
Yeah. So the function itself is not all that long. It
Right.
was just, what in the world was that in the middle
one
of it?
piece, yeah.
So thank goodness somebody took the time and actually knew the answer and was willing to share. That was great.
49 possible combinations.
Mhm.
So now is your client wanting to use that for the equipment in their shop to see how quickly they turn stuff
Yes.
over, how many days?
Yes,
Mm.
and we didn't want weekends to skew that number.
Well, so could you imagine if you modified this to be how many hours it's in your shop based
Right.
on
Work
hours in a
hours
work
and
day?
non-work hours.
Exactly.
Exactly.
The same thing we're talking about doing that
Yeah,
like
to
that.
expand it even further.
Yeah.
To just say for each one, they could have each day you can have a maximum of 8 hours per day,
Right.
you know, and then ignore time after 5 p.m. or whatever.
And then use the calculations with the holidays so that if it's like a holiday Memorial Day weekend, you close at noon instead of 5
I think that
to incorporate
function
all
supports
kinds.
that in there too. I think you can add in holidays somehow.
Yeah. So now, so the function just asks for the start and end time, and then takes care of the rest.
So yeah, so it's calling that custom func or that calculation is in there under this num business days.
Mhm.
So our function uses that calculation to get the opposite of this.
Mhm.
So it takes the start timestamp, the end timestamp, gets the dates from those, finds the total number of days in that time, and then subtracts the number of business days from that, which gives us the number of weekend days, and then we take the duration of that weekend off from whatever the duration would otherwise be.
Mhm.
So there's the if you started it and finished it, 10 a.m. on Monday, you wouldn't see a huge chunk of time for getting that done.
Right.
It'd be the same as if you had started on Thursday and finished on Friday.
Now, the question that I have about custom functions is something like the address, the mailing label, or the salutation of, like the Mr. Bob Jones or whatever. When do you want to not make it a calculated field versus it being a custom function? Versus there was a video that Todd Geist said he prefers to use scripts versus custom functions. So when do you know to make something a custom function versus making it a script or a calculation?
Depends on the use cases for it, I think.
Go repetitive use.
So if there's I'm trying to think of a good example of this. So let's say we have a job, like a repair job that we want to do. A job, we may want to know how long it took to complete that job. So we may have a very simple function, which is just end time minus start time, and that gives us the duration of that job. That's something that we're probably going to want to know for every job, right? And we could use a custom function to calculate that if we wanted to. That's a pretty simple calculation, right? We could make it a custom function. But since that is a piece of information that we're going to want to know about a job, we could make a stored calculation field in that table that gives you that time. So since this is a thing that we're looking at particularly for this table, and we're going to want a value for every record in that table, we could turn that into a stored calculation field pretty easily versus anytime we're trying to reference it, calling a custom function. The advantage of doing that and putting it in as a field would be that we can now search on that field. Particularly since this is one that's probably not going to be within the table, it could be indexed as well if you make a stored calculation. And just doing that. If it was something that we're going to use in many different places, like that other one that Erica showed, that was who showed the get directors one? Did you show that?
Yep.
Like get directors. That's something that maybe they'll be calling that in a whole bunch of different places. Oops, I messed that one.
Sorry.
They may be calling that in a whole bunch of different places, and there could be lots of different use cases for it. There could be
or something that you don't use
yeah.
on a regular basis. Like if you want to run a report and you want to grab that stuff, but you don't want to take up space for a field or take up time in indexing or processing time within a field. So you'd use it if you're going to call it when you're doing something, maybe a report.
Yeah, or you can use custom functions in fields too. But I'd say you'd make it a field if it's particularly tied to that table and a single record within that table. You could, in a lot of these things too, you can use scripts in a similar way, which I think is what you were talking about, where you said you saw something.
Well, I think Todd was saying, somebody was saying that Todd said he preferred to not do custom functions and do scripts, but I think then later he may have changed his view on it, but I'm not sure where the scripting would come in from these calculations.
So if you have something that you can't really get done, a single calculation, it might make sense to write a script that you pass a parameter into the script and the script returns a result. And so you could use it in a pretty similar way to a custom function then. And both of them are kind of reflecting and mimicking, I guess, what you'd get in like a more object-oriented programming language with methods, or I guess even some scripting languages that would just have functions. Both of them would do the same thing, where you essentially call something that you pre-format and you pass a parameter and you get a result out of it. And it just, you might use a script like a custom function if it needs to search for something, get a found set, get some results from that, go to another table, look up some things over there. Maybe you have to do a series of finds and things. It could be faster to do that. You need to change layouts and everything for doing all that. It could be faster to do that than using execute SQL, which might be a little bit slower. Erica knows I've been testing execute SQL stuff, and I found that while it's still fast, execute SQL can be slower than switching layouts, entering find mode, and doing all that kind of stuff for certain things. And so, if you have to do all of that, it might make more sense to write a script that essentially just returns a number and takes it back to whatever layout you were on originally, versus using a custom function to look the same stuff. So
Are you executing the SQL locally or from a website?
in FileMaker Pro, against a database hosted on FileMaker server.
I came across this and I have a question.
Mhm.
For changing a UUID to a number, because it's believed, or maybe debunked, I don't know, as being a speed enhancement, because
Yeah, I
it's
think
indexed
that's true.
quicker,
Mhm.
and only in large systems, not, if you had 100 records, but that's the
You
case.
see a noticeable difference there, yeah.
Okay.
Integers are faster to
For-
find on, number fields are faster to find on than text. And I think that's pretty true across a lot of different database platforms. And I've seen tests of the same thing across, like MySQL databases and Oracle and everything like that too. Particularly if you have to do unique values, serial number is going to be a lot faster than UUID because there's a lot less comparison that has to happen. It's easier for the system to find it. I imagine it's also true. I haven't been benchmarking myself on it, but I imagine that it's also true in FileMaker, where if you use numeric UUIDs, it'll be faster to validate that it's
Right.
a unique value and maybe to find on it and things as well too.
Yeah, because the UUID is a text string, right? It's digits and text with dashes and stuff.
Get UUID.
Yeah.
Now, since you have
Clear
this
that
up here, go ahead and click on one of those. So this is a great function if there are people out there that don't know, that aren't familiar with Brian Dunning's site here. So along the left, you can actually look at your list of custom functions and either randomly flip through, which is kind of fun just to have a surprise that you wouldn't look, or just to put in any kind of thing like calendars or dates, and it'll show you all the functions and the ratings. And sometimes it's nice to go through and find anything that's like a 4.4, 4.5 or higher, just to see what it is and how useful it is, and which things maybe to avoid if there's another one that is better. But it's a great resource of just a depository of all kinds of custom functions out there.
I watched this video. I thought this was excellent for senior developers. Talks about.
Hi everyone, this is Richard Carlton. I'm
Not
here with Mr.
Planning on running it for you, but I recommend. I thought it was worth a watch. They were another level of complexity beyond the things that we've discussed here tonight.
What are some of the things that are in there?
He's got some. Go ahead.
Some of his are simple. I think Richard Carlton said that his are kind of on the lower end because he's the user interface, the training type of person. So the ones that he talks about are real kind of simple, but very useful. But not super fancy, but stuff you would use on a regular basis that would be worth.
Right. And Steve did some things that neatened up the format of XML so that it was more humanly readable. You've pulled out a function like that for me before, but this is something he wrote. Steve wrote half the things that he demonstrated.
Like it.
Yes.
Yeah. FileMaker has something like that for JSON now in 16. There's a function that they added, which was like JSON neat or something like that. Yeah. That does that. Yeah.
And he has something that finds the characters, character 9, character 13, those things, so that it's
ASCII numbers,
without
that was good.
having to change it somewhere. He's got it in a custom function, so he can make the change in the custom function, and that change is reflected everywhere he used it in the system.
Yeah, so those were all good.
Yeah, I thought they were good too.
All right.
All right, so mine aren't particularly fancy,
Oh, yes.
but they're useful things, I think. So I like to use execute SQL a lot. And an unfortunate thing that you can, I didn't come up with these, but I found these online somewhere and they're very useful. An unfortunate thing that can happen when you're using execute SQL is your if you change your field names, it can break your SQL queries because your
Sure.
query is a string usually. So I'll do this with let me put in some serial numbers here and add in a name field. And let's call this to be contacts. So we've got now our contacts table. Let me put these extra fields on here. All right, and let's delete this one, make a new one. Okay. All right, so we've got a person in here now, David, with a phone number, and I'll add Erica in here as another person too. Nicely formatted there.
Love it.
Yep, thank you, Erica. All right, so if we were going to do an execute SQL thing now, so let me just clear some of these out. So let's say we wanted to do a SQL query against our contacts table to look up a phone number of a person. All right. So we'll do this in a let expression. So we'll say let here, and then format these things. So we'll do our SQL query might be like this. Select phone from contacts where name equals, I'll do me here, we'll say name equals David. Oops. And escape these. And let's see. So result equals execute SQL. SQL, and I'm just going to not pass in any separators there. Okay. Whoops. Select phone from contacts where name equals. Well, you know what? Better practice for this anyway. Let's do this as a parameterized thing. Okay. So first of all, this is one thing I wanted to mention to everyone here. Always use parameter. I was going to do it the other way and then switch around, but this is easier. Always use parameterized queries rather than putting a result in here like this. Right? So I could put it in there like that, but it's always a better practice to use parameterized queries where you insert those question marks in there. All right, so anyway, here's our SQL query. Select phone from contacts where name equals question mark. So this is great. This is all working fine, but we run into a problem if I'm working in my database and say, well, instead of name, let's just change this to be name first. I'll hit change here. That breaks the SQL query. Now, luckily, FileMaker in 16 made this give you some really good results, so you can actually see what the issue is. The column name does not exist in any table, right? Because we just renamed it. This is supposed to be name first. Now it works. So if you've been working in a system for a while and you change a field name, it's like, you're going to remember to go back and change all your SQL queries. Something's going to get lost, probably. So to make these SQL queries a little more resilient, there's a series of custom functions that you can use to get these field names and table names so that if something gets renamed, it doesn't break it. I mean, hopefully you're not doing too much field renaming anyway, but let me put this in here. Rather than putting the actual field name in, we can use this custom function SQL get field name and put in a field name in here. And now this will automatically resolve what that field name is and turn it into a valid SQL query. So we can see here the result works now. Right, we're getting the actual result down here. And if I go in and see, it's still good. If I go in and change this field name, let's change it from name first back to name, it doesn't break the SQL query anymore.
So that's the advantage.
Yeah.
That's
Actually, and hold on, why am I getting this field missing here? I get a field missing on that. Does it not work in the in the data viewer? Yeah, you know, okay, so I don't think it works in the data viewer. Let's take it out of here. I think it doesn't update. All right, so we've got name first in here. Let's make a result field and we'll set it in there. Okay. So, all right, now when I run this, put result down here. So it fills that value in. That's the phone number for David that we just looked up. I can clear it out, right? Run it again. We have this in our script. It works good. Okay, so let's see here. So this one right now, the field name is name first. Let's change it. Change that to name. And now if we look in here, this is updated itself already because FileMaker knows the field reference in your calculation. But because we have this in this custom function, SQL get field name, it's actually going to fill it in appropriately on the call when we do execute SQL. So before, let's save it. Before that would have broken it, changing the field name. But because we put it in this, we called the field itself in the SQL get field name, it's more resilient and it'll update automatically when you change it. Yeah. So let's see what the SQL query actually looks like. So this is what the query string looks like now. It says where it automatically does the table name dot field name in quotes and everything for you, and it handles escaping and everything properly. It is very precise and accurate, and it saves you from having to write all that out, and you don't have to worry about the field name changing. So I'll change it here again from name to name first. And then we'll evaluate what it looks like now. And so it handles that field name being changed. And same thing with the tables. If I change the table name, there's the table equivalent of it as well. So rather than doing, so there's SQL get field name, we can do the same thing on the table. I'll just put in my concatenation stuff in here. So SQL get table name. I'll do the same thing here. I'll just pass in some field in that table. Doesn't matter which field you pass in.
Is that a custom function or is that native to FileMaker?
That's a custom function. Okay. So here it grabs the table name now of that field that I passed in. And it grabs it from the table occurrence name. So again, if I go through here and change this to, contact like that. Oops. And run this here. It handles all of that renaming. So it makes your execute SQL queries a lot more resilient. If you go in and change something, you're not going to break your whole system in every place that you've used execute SQL. And it also means that you don't have to remember the quotes and dots and things like that writing your SQL queries, which I think makes it a lot easier. So the end SQL query does look a little more complex, right? Because we've got all this concatenation and everything that's happening in there, like these get table names, get field names. We have to concatenate all this stuff because it has to be a calculation. But it does stop it from breaking, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about renaming something and screwing something up at some point. So those are two custom functions that I love using for everything all over the place. I've just put those in. Anytime I make a solution, I just drop those in there. Actually, all of these are kind of the same thing. So another one that I like is to detect if you're using FileMaker Go or FileMaker Pro or WebDirect. Sometimes you want to take users to different layouts and things like that when you're starting your database. And so I've got a number of custom functions that, again, I like to just drop in all the time that help you determine that. So there's the custom function now, is Pro, to tell you if it's FileMaker Pro or not. So let's take a look at these. So here, if we look this up, here we use the is Pro function. Is it just going to tell me, is Pro true? Yes, this is FileMaker Pro that we're in. Is server? No, this is not FileMaker server. So if maybe you have a startup script that you want to be fast, if you're running the script on FileMaker server, you can just exit right away. You can just say if is server, exit script. Your startup script is done very, very quickly. And so it saves you from having to do all like the get application version, comparing strings, looking for the word pro in there. Let's look at that here. If we look at, is Go, is Pro. So, you don't have to write this get pattern count, get application version Pro over and over again. I think it's really easy to just have your calculation. It's just if you can write your thing, say if is Pro, do this. If is server, do this. And so it's just a series of custom functions that have a pretty simple calculation. But when it comes to writing scripts, I find them to be very, very useful. You can take it if they're on an iPad versus an iPhone, and you're doing a FileMaker Go solution. You could take them to different layouts. So you could say if is Pro, go to desktop layout. Else, if is Go, we can say if it's Go, just to see if it's FileMaker Go in general, or maybe we want to say is Go Pad. Is Go phone, we can make distinctions there. And so it's really easy to read. It's easy to enter in a script for doing if statements. Go to phone layout. Go to iPad layout. It's just doing that very easy. Similarly, if you are using phone or tablet here, and you want to do a different layout for portrait view versus landscape. Similarly, I've got a series of custom functions that are very useful for that. Let's pull this up. Is portrait and is landscape that checks the ratio of the window height to the window width. So again, if we're here on the iPad and we're going to do different layouts for portrait versus landscape, we can say in here, if is landscape, go to the landscape layout. Else, obviously we can just say else because it's not landscape, it's portrait, right? But I'll put it in here anyway. Is portrait, go to,
That's for the person that's holding their phone kind of catty
In
way.
between.
well, the phone is only going to know it's one way or the other, right? Because it's going to
Right.
get that on. You can use that on whatever is window resize trigger. What's the script trigger for that? On layout size change. So you might call that on an on layout size change script trigger to detect if the user has rotated between portrait and landscape, so you can take them to the correct layout for that particular view. And again, it's not that it's a particularly complex calculation, but reading it, it's really easy to see what each of these things mean when you come back and you have to read this through the script. Is Pro? Yes, that's FileMaker Pro. Is Go Pad? Is Go Phone? Portrait, Landscape? I just find it very easy to read those that way. And if you're working on a mobile solution, particularly with different layouts, are going to have where some people are going to be accessing it on Pro, some people are going to be accessing it on WebDirect, some people are going to be accessing it on Go. This makes it really easy to just manage your startup script to take everyone to the right places, or to reuse scripts and to do the same detection that's going to take them to the right place depending on what device they're on. So very useful.
And is the result on that only stored temporarily for that custom function? So it's not
just on that call,
just on
right?
that call.
Yeah. Now you could store it somewhere, but it's pretty easy to just recall that function anytime you need to,
Right,
because
because it's just a
it's like,
Boolean. Right?
yeah, it just returns true or false,
Right.
and it's very short to write it out,
Mhm.
so it's really easy to just call it anytime you need to. Let's see, what else do we have on here? So same thing as WebDirect is on there too. Same thing, major version, and the version of the server as well. So if we want to see, let's see here, let's go to the data viewer again. Use FM version, FM major version here. So this tells me that I'm on FileMaker 16. So if you've got a solution where people are going to be accessing it through different versions of FileMaker, this is a really easy way to get that major version so you can use specific features or ignore features. So for example, you can't call truncate table on 14 or 13. That's only going to work in 15 or 16. So you could do this and say, if they're 15, 16, great, let's just call truncate table. Good to go. It's very fast, right? Otherwise, if it's in an earlier version, you have to call delete all records, which could take a long time if there are a lot of records in there. This is also really good if you need to install plugins where certain versions are going to be compatible with certain versions of FileMaker. I've got a client, they were using an older version of certain plugins, and then we were using a new version with newer versions of FileMaker because the old version of the plugin didn't work on newer versions of FileMaker. And so we use these functions to determine which plugin to install. And did the same thing for Windows. It's even more important because on FileMaker, you can only use 32-bit plugins. And then I think on 14 and later, you can do either 32-bit or 64-bit plugins. And 13 doesn't have the version check to see if it's 32-bit or 64-bit. So you can't call like the get application architecture function, whatever that is, right? Get application architecture, right? So this returns, from this, we can tell this is a 64-bit program that we're running. But on 13, this get function doesn't exist. And so you can't call it to see if you need to install the 32-bit plugin. You have to look for the version first, and then figure out if you're going to check and see if it's 32-bit or 64-bit. Because if it's 14 or later, then you can call the get application architecture and see if it's going to be on 14.
It comes back as a real old version, just make up signs, look pretty.
Yeah.
Call us today.
Call us today.
Well, and I just ran into something not similar to that, but page numbering. In version 12 or 13 going forward, where you used to do the 2 hashtags, now you're inserting the page number thing, which is different. So I had to, for my client, didn't work because the page numbering thing in her version was different. So
she has 12.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So good to check all those things.
Know the versions.
Yeah. So the major version is really good, right? Because if we do get application version, Pro Advanced 16.0.1, if all we really care is, are they in 13, 14, 15, or 16, this, we have to do a whole bunch of parsing on this now to figure that out. So the custom function, which is just FM major version 16, it's a lot easier to say if it's greater than or equal to 14, then do all this stuff. If it's 13 or lower, then go this other direction. So it helps a lot with that. Let's see here. The other thing, which I don't have a specific example of it here because it's all totally by your use case, is if you have to check certain text values in a lot of different places. So say you have like many different kinds of orders, and you have an order type field, and you can put in your order type. So maybe it's like a quote or a reorder or a sales, or an initial sale or something like that, and you're gonna handle it differently. It's a digital sale or physical sale. You want to label these an order type a certain way so that you're going to categorize them, whatever it is. It can be really useful rather than in your scripts to say something like, if, and then we have our order type field, right? Which I don't have a real thing here. Order type is equal to whatever, quote versus whatever we're going to put in here. And handling this in a whole bunch of different ways in a bunch of different places. What you can do sometimes is use custom functions to kind of standardize that string so that if you have to go back and change something in some place, it'll update it everywhere. Now, hopefully you're not changing these values too much, but just it's something to keep in mind that if you are going to be, or if it's a complex string or something like that that you're looking for, to make sure you don't make a mistake in it. We can call this one, well, let's see, let's do contact types, right? So let's say we're going to have a series of contact types. We're going to have vendors and employees and
Customers.
yeah, customers, all these kind of things, right? So we can have contact type vendor, let's say, and this might just be the string vendor. That's it. And again, not hard to calculate, but let's add a field in here. Type contact type, right? We'll do it like this. So we're gonna have our contact type down here now. And when we're doing scripting for this, we could have lots of different values in here. Maybe we make this a popover and they can select from it. So the users aren't going to enter anything wrong if we're using a value list, right? Let's do our value lists here. And this is going to be contact types. And this will be, employee, vendor, client. That's good for now, right? So our users are going to get this right 100% of the time now because they can only select from these values. They're not going to select anything other than these values put in there. But in our scripting, we could do something wrong. If we're going to say if contact, oops, what do we do? Type equals vendor.
Mm-hmm.
We could risk making a mistake here. I mean, this is a pretty simple one, but if we have a lot of places where we're checking this sort of thing, and maybe we want to change the value vendor at some point, it could make sense to do our custom function now instead, contact type vendor, to put that in there, because then we'll make sure that if we have to change it, it's going to be the same everywhere. One place that I actually do use this very frequently is putting in like server address information. If we want to contact something, say we're doing, we're working with an API and we want to pass in a server address and a username and a password that we're going to be calling in a lot of different places through the whole system. We can go into custom functions and let's call this my API username, right? Which is just going to be my username, and we'll make another one here, my API password, which is going to be my super secret password.
Calling it random doesn't make it so.
Yeah. So now we've got these two custom functions in here. When we're working with this API, we might have 10 different scripts that are going to use this username and password over and over again. And it's a good idea to change your passwords every however often, depending on what service you're using and what the requirements are for that. But if we're using the the new curl functionality, or we're using a plugin, or even if we're using send mail, right? So let's say we have a whole bunch of scripts in different places that are using send mail, and we're going to use SMTP. If we use a custom function for this, we can put in our usernames and passwords here using these custom functions.
No, you're actually putting the username and password in the custom function?
In the
or
custom function, that's
pointing
all
to a
they
field?
are.
Okay.
All the custom functions are just the text of whatever the username and password is. But now we can, maybe we have 10 different scripts that use send mail and call the new JSON and curl functionality and interact with some API. And we can have them all over the place and have these scripts all saved. And if there's a security issue, whatever, we're changing our username, we're changing our password. Now I can just go into custom functions and update whatever my username and password is to be, my new username, and password can be my new password. And all of those scripts where I'm using that username and password, the correct username and password in it. And I can change it in one spot. It's really easy to find it. It's clearly labeled. and everything is fixed. I don't have to go remember how many scripts did I use that username and password in. It's one spot, and I don't even have to think about where it's used anywhere else because it's all going to be calling that custom function.
Now, in creating custom functions, tell me if I'm wrong about this, you can only adjust it and modify it if you're in FileMaker Advanced.
That's right, yes.
But people that aren't in Advanced can access them. So if you're doing the passwords like that, is there a way that you can lock out a custom function so that somebody, a subordinate, can't see that kind of information? How would you hide that custom function so they can't see the username and password?
Availability at the bottom of the screen.
For only full access. Excellent.
So, but you still want them, most of the time you wouldn't want to restrict that to, I mean, maybe it means they can't, I actually haven't used that feature before. Does that mean they can't add it in somewhere, or they can't?
I think it means that they can't
Call it.
see it.
See it.
Okay.
I think they can
I don't
use
know.
it, they just can't see it.
Because for these kind of things, like with the username and password, you might set that in a custom function so that if the user encounters an error for something, an order doesn't get submitted properly, something like that, maybe it emails you and you get an email alert about it. Whether it was programmed in directly into the script or put in the custom function, if it was in the script, then they could look it up anyway and just see it, because you can go into the send mail script step, right? If they're a user who can edit this sort of thing, they can go into the send mail script step and go to your SMTP server and see what your username and password is by clicking in there. It's not like it's particularly secure the normal way. But if we do it in a custom function, it just saves you from having to update it. So it's not more secure or less secure. You do need the user to still be able to evaluate it. If if they had Pro Advanced, they'd have the data viewer. If they're in Pro, they're not going to have it. But they could still, just as easy as they could write a script to come in here and see what you've typed in instead of that password. Right now we have a string that we just typed in here.
Well, I'm not even just saying particularly for accessing that, but just any kind of data that you put in there. If you had like a super secret password, or not password, but like a phone number that you were hiding because it was somebody that was, on everybody to see, and you maybe created some custom function to pop it in if somebody was logged in under their certain name to be able to see something.
So if you were doing that, I would say you'd be better off using the security features of FileMaker to prevent users from having access to that record.
It's like the users and groups,
Yeah.
privileges.
And so you make a privilege set that say, like, you've got your contacts database and there's VIP and it's all the celebrities, right? You don't want celebrities' phone numbers getting out. You're going to have users in the system and they want to see some of them, but unless they're in the management staff, you don't want them getting Beyonce's phone number from your database.
Right.
So you can make a custom privilege set then where users wouldn't have access to those particular contacts or those set of related records. They wouldn't be able to maybe have contact phone numbers and a set of related records so that they could see the main contact information but not the actual phone numbers. They go along with it and adjust their permissions that way.
So now you had mentioned that there's some that you pretty much put in every solution that you create, and it's what version, if they're using Go or not, portrait landscape, what other kinds of custom functions do you extend on every new kind of creation?
These are the ones that I will often just go like, select all, copy, paste on the new one.
You can transfer them between files.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, so like this one, I mean, we've got all these things in here, and now these ones down at the bottom we wouldn't do. But I might select from here up to the top, right, and just hit copy and use all of these just to start a new file. Like, oh, I'm working on something new, new solution, save it here.
So with all the different devices, that's pretty much a standard then. If it's what version they're running, and if it's Go or Pro or.
I mean, yeah, I'll drop them in there like that. Often just getting started with things.
Okay.
It's really easy to do that. So yeah.
It says if you do not have full access privileges and attempt to edit a calculation that uses a custom function restricted to full access accounts, you see the string private function instead of the custom function. You cannot change the calculation as long as the private function declaration appears in the formula.
Okay.
So you see it, you just can't change it.
No, you just see, just like when you have no access to a record or something,
that's what
there's
it
that.
shows? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe that would help protect it then. Because you wouldn't be able to call it. You wouldn't be able to add it to a new script because you can't see it.
Right.
But if it executed, you'd still get the result from it somewhere that someone has put it in, it sounds
Does
like.
not know what the data is. Okay.
So I guess that would help protect your username and password that way then. Because no one else would even know what the name of that function is to type it in to get it to work. And if they did, it wouldn't register it as being pointed to that custom function.
Well, and even if you named it something like, get rubber ducky or something that has nothing at all to do with the username and password, they wouldn't even think to get to it to even be curious to find out.
Yeah. But that's kind of security through obscurity, which is not real security anyway. So it sounds like that option, like I said, even if it was just username and password, it wouldn't work for them. They couldn't type in username and have it execute that custom function. That's what it sounds like, at least from what Erica just read. So that's good. So yeah, like I said, not anything super complex, but those are some custom functions that I think are useful to have, particularly the execute SQL ones. I love those ones. I use them all the time.
Are those the three that you use all the time?
Yeah, the SQL get field name, SQL get table name, and then there was another one, those SQL get, I can't remember what the other one, I don't even know what that one does.
Field and table are the big
Column. I don't know. These might have been on Brian Dunning's site or something like that. I'm not sure where those came from. Oops.
that one.
Nope.
So are there any other resources other than what we found, like Brian Dunning, some YouTube videos, putting in custom functions? Are there any other sites that you know that have a good repository of?
Brian Dunning's been pretty good. That's what I would
Pretty
usually look up for things.
Yeah, that site that I saw, he has something called Patternize, where he, how when you get a receipt and your credit card number shows a bunch of hashtags and then the last 4 digits of the number, he's got a function that generates that for you without having to do all the parsing and thinking about that.
This looks like, oh, look, Brian Dunning's got something similar on their site here. Yeah, maybe this was from here too. This is SQL Ref. It does the same thing essentially. You can get the table currency field or both. Looks like. So it's one function that essentially does the same thing as the 2 functions that I had before. You just pass in what you want. If you want part 1, part 2, or part 3. Yeah, I have no idea where that came from. But anyway, yeah, this is, Brian Dunning said this is a similar use case to make your SQL queries resilient to field name changes.
Like you're used to.
Well, at first I wasn't sure if I would like the isPro versus isGo pad versus isGo versus isGo phone, but now I can see if you're adding it into a script where it's just a true or false, it's nice to have it versus just what is it? Just to get a return of Go or Pro or whatever in a field, to be able to see this, then you're actually, when you're writing your script,
I think
you're getting a yes or no, and it's making your script logically.
Yeah.
You can follow the logic versus guessing what the reply is, what the result is.
Yeah. And that's why, and like I said, it's not anything major, but it helps me keep things straight in my head.
Exactly.
And it makes writing the script really easily too, because I don't have to remember, can you get application. What is the word that I have to look for when I'm doing this?
The second left word.
Yeah. I have to look at the pattern count for
the right word,
pro.
the left word.
But wait, does advanced say pro, or does it just say advanced, or does it say pro advanced? Yeah.
Is it all together?
Yeah. So it helps a lot with that, and then it's so simple because I don't have to remember that whole function. I just say it's pro, go there. Really useful in startup scripts. Or anytime we have to take people to layouts or do different things based on what they are. Maybe in Pro you want to make a new window, in WebDirect you don't want to make a new window, right? So that kind of thing.
And there actually was a custom function too that did something with read labeling windows that opened up that were secondary windows. But I wasn't following. I almost did a demo on that one, but I wasn't sure if I was following it correctly.
Well, if you want to look at it,
No. It's in that list. I mean, that list goes on and on. I think there's something like 500-600 different custom function examples.
Yeah.
That's why it was fun to just randomly go through it, you know, for a couple hours and see all the different stuff that pops up that I would never search for.
Yeah.
Like Roman numerals. You put in any number and it will generate the Roman numeral for you.
That's pretty cool.
And that's cool.
Yeah.
You know, you need it if you're doing like a Super Bowl ad or something like that. You need to know what it is. But, you know, it's not anything that you need on a regular basis, but at least you know it's there if you needed to do something with it.
convert, if you had converts from Fahrenheit to Celsius over and over, or measurements, cooking measurements, you're going to go, Europeans use that crazy, what is that system they've been trying to get us to use all these years?
Well, maybe even creating something like that FileMaker widget, not FileMaker, the Apple OS widget that allows you to choose a measurement and convert one way or the other, maybe to do something like that in FileMaker with a custom function.
And FileMaker Form has a bunch of custom functions as well. Not just Brian done, by the way.
Good things. All right, does anyone else have any ideas or things they want to share? No? Okay. Well, I guess the next thing now is talk about what we want for next time. I hope no one has been commenting because I have not been looking at the comments. I just realized that.
Is there anybody on?
There's not anyone on right now, so I think we're okay. Right after holiday, so. But so what do we want to do for next time? No, we're still live. We're still on. What do we want to talk about next time?
So I saw something that I thought was interesting. If you can go to your Chrome or Google and search
Stop doing that.
FileMaker CRM prototype. And there's a video that goes with it, but I'm not sure if we would be able to get this guy. Basically, he's got a context database interwoven with a communications database interwoven with proposals and invoices all in one layout that navigates just from the one layout with every bit of data. The data entry, the finding everything, all just in one layout. The entire system.
Well, you want to send me an email about that, and we'll see if we can get in contact with that person?
So that would be something that I would be interested if he could talk about how he created it. What's his name? Gary Bruznowski. He's on the top one up there, the single layer CRM prototype.
Single layout.
And so I stumbled across that, but it was fascinating because he didn't do any of the data entry into any fields. A window would pop up that you would enter the stuff, but depending on where you clicked, a different box popped up to populate the fields. And then you could parse the communications via emails or phone calls or whatever you had all within the same window. You never ever left the one window. I just thought that was interesting.
Well, maybe we can
just do something a little different,
contact him about that, see if he's interested in presenting.
So that's my input, just to see how he did that. I thought it was
good research.
Interesting.
Anyone else have any ideas for things?
Will it be after DevCon? What's
yes, because DevCon is the 24th.
Oh, July? Okay.
July.
So maybe we can talk about interesting things from DevCon. That would
Show
probably
and tell people who went.
Yeah, no, I'll be going down there. Mario will be going.
Now, do we have anybody in our group that is presenting at DevCon? Is anyone at 360 Works doing anything?
Jesse might be. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know who's presenting.
Okay. We had a class ages ago with Jesse, kind of led it on how to deal with clients. And it was so good.
You do a number of sessions like that at DevCon, like business things. That's really good.
How to negotiate, how to put a proposal together. I learned so much from Jesse about the meter and selling it in blocks, things like that.
Well, you do that too, don't you guys? You do your sprints of 2 weeks worth of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and even just things like we met a client. Haven't done a proposal yet, but it was all about the questioning of ownership, and that's an interesting topic too.
Yeah,
if you own and are able to access things that you create and allow them to have it as well, are you basically leasing your software to them to do anything that they want, or do they own it straight out? Does that limit you from using any functionality that you've created in it that's cool that you haven't done anyplace else? Those kinds of topics that. I usually tell them that I own it, but they own it as well. So if I want to do anything that I create that's cool, they can't stop me.
Yeah. The thing that we usually say is, because I think, in our, obviously we don't into a lot of detail about all these things, but what we usually say is that the users have primary ownership of any front end like business-specific functionality that they're doing. And if we create something that's more generic, say we're working on something, we come up with some cool way to parse XML, right? With FileMaker
Routines,
calculations,
yeah.
and it's very fast and it's fantastic. And we're like, wow, we want to use this all the time for every XML solution. Then we say that Blue Feather owns it, and they have an unlimited use license, including redistribution, and they can do whatever they want with it too. So
I've seen where they just, in the comment field, they put their own copyright on it for that particular routine. And then you go through scripts and you see so many scripts that have been borrowed. And so it's a hodgepodge.
it's tough to manage that sometimes, yeah.
I wanted to ask you, and I've spoken to Christy about this some, but I've been going to a lot of these job networking things, and they're full of IT people, but not a soul yet has heard of FileMaker. And the question has come up, how do you sell, or how do you pitch FileMaker as opposed to Oracle or MySQL? So that would be interesting. Pros and cons.
Yeah, so a lot of business things. Maybe after DevCon we can do a business meeting as well and talk about some of those things. So, okay. Well, we'll look at these for topics. And so we got some things now. We got this CRM prototype thing. Maybe we'll talk about that, and business things, and cool ideas from DevCon to do as a catch up. So sounds good. Sounds like we've got some things. We'll see how DevCon goes, and if there's lots of exciting stuff to talk about, then we'll do those things then. All right.
So I
Thanks for
know why
watching.
people aren't here because, how's that saying go? If you have a fifth on the fourth, you'll be something on the fifth.
Out till the 6th or something. Yeah.
That's it.
All right. I'm going to end our broadcast here too.